Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, May 22nd. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith delivered a provincial address yesterday, providing an update on the province's separation movement. In the speech, Smith touched on several issues surrounding the movement. She began by responding to a recent court ruling that found the separation petition unconstitutional, saying she was disappointed by the decision. At the same time, Smith made clear that both she personally and the UCP plan to vote in favor of a united Canada in the upcoming referendum.
Last week, an Alberta judge released a decision finding that the citizen initiative petition organized by the group Stay Free Alberta on the issue of Alberta separation is unconstitutional because, in the judge's view, there was not adequate consultation done with the First Nations band about the potential effect of the petition on their treaty rights. This ruling fundamentally misinterprets the nature of the duty to consult, which was never meant to prevent citizens from making their voices heard through a democratic process. Now, I want to be clear. I support Alberta remaining in Canada. That is how I would vote on separation in a provincial referendum. It is also the position of my government and my caucus. However, despite my personal support for remaining in Canada, I am deeply troubled by an erroneous court decision that interferes with the democratic rights of hundreds of thousands of Albertans. Albertans who volunteered, prepared petitions, made their case to fellow citizens, and appear to have secured the required amount of signatures necessary under Alberta law to hold a provincial referendum.
In response to the ruling, Smith says the province will appeal the decision, taking the case all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada if necessary, while also adding a new question to the October referendum as the legal challenge moves forward.
That is why I'm announcing today that I will be requesting our government add an additional question to the October 19th referendum vote announced previously. The additional question will be, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada? Because this proposed referendum question does not directly trigger separation, but if successful, would ask Alberta's government to commence the legal process necessary to hold a binding referendum on the matter, the recent court ruling would not be applicable, and the referendum question I outlined could proceed. This question will also ensure the 700,000 signatories to both the Forever Canada petition and the Stay Free Alberta petition are respected, and the will of Albertans is heard.
Speaking directly to Albertans backing separation, Smith acknowledged their frustration with the latest setback, urging them not to give up while also encouraging them to consider voting to remain in Canada because, in her words, quote, the tide has turned in our favor.
Now, to those hundreds of thousands of Albertans who are still not convinced or are unsatisfied with the pace of change and believe that separation is the answer, I want you to know that I empathize with you and I understand why you feel that way. You are justifiably frustrated and angry with Ottawa. You are proud and loyal Albertans that have watched our province be taken advantage of repeatedly over past decades, and you want it to stop. So do I, more than anything. Like you, I love this province and our people so much. I am so proud to be Albertan. But I ask you to please consider joining me to vote for Alberta to remain in Canada and not give up on our beautiful country just as we're gaining respect and the tide has turned in our favor. Not when our fellow Canadians, even those that may support different political parties, are nonetheless supporting Alberta's vision for a prosperous, energy-rich nation with strong provinces building a Canada we can be proud of again.
Following Premier Danielle Smith's update on the referendum process, Prime Minister Mark Carney voiced support for her message of cooperative federalism.
Canada's working. We're working in a spirit of cooperative federalism to make the country better. We're renovating the country as we go, and Alberta being at the center of that is essential. I look forward to working alongside Premier Smith, alongside the Leader of the Opposition, alongside all parliamentarians, all 37 members from Alberta, and Canadians of all stripes, Albertans of all stripes, to build a better Alberta, build a better Canada.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also weighed in on the ongoing separatist sentiment in Alberta, saying he and all Conservative MPs would campaign to keep the province in Canada if a referendum is held. Poilievre says Conservatives would take the same approach in Quebec if another sovereignty referendum campaign were launched there.
So I'm a strong Canadian federalist, a proud Albertan, and a proud Canadian. I want a strong Alberta within a united Canada, and all conservatives will be campaigning for Canadian unity in Alberta, and potentially, we hope not, but potentially in Quebec as well, if the separatists win there. We believe that Alberta deserves a fair deal in this country, which means that we unblock the resources, we allow the oil and gas sector to grow, we get the federal government off the backs and out of the way of Alberta workers and small businesses so the province can prosper, reverse the gun grab and other unnecessary federal liberal irritants, but all for the purpose of making our country more united, more affordable, and more strong. It is the job of the Prime Minister of Canada to unite the country. And as Prime Minister in waiting, I will begin that work myself. I will be campaigning across the province of Alberta, encouraging Albertans to stay as part of the Canadian family and encouraging nationwide unity for all Canadians.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith shuffled her cabinet following a couple of resignations. Smith named Jason Nixon as the new Minister of Finance. Nixon takes over for Nate Horner, who announced that he is stepping down and will not seek re-election in 2027. Smith also announced that Adriana LaGrange will leave the preventative care section of the health ministry to run hospitals. She takes over from Matt Jones, who had been in charge of hospitals, but this week also announced that he too is stepping down. In other moves, Nathan Newdorf takes over Nixon's previous social services portfolio, and Tara Sawyer becomes the province's new agriculture minister. Our Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts sat down with University of Lethbridge political science professor Dr. Yael Belanger to break down some of the top headlines coming out of Alberta.
Now let's talk about the two ministers who resigned, forcing Premier Smith to make a cabinet shuffle, Yael. Finance Minister Nate Horner and Hospitals Minister Matt Jones both stepping down. Could we perhaps see more not seeking re-election next year?
I think so. Horner and Jones, they walked away because they didn't want to hold a referendum on separation. And I believe that there's probably dissent within the ranks. I think it also points to that the moment that this is not an exclusively internal issue. We've now seen David Parker from Take Back Alberta, who helped put her in office, and Jeffrey Rath are now both calling for her to step down. Interestingly enough, opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, who's an MP for a hardcore separatist riding in Alberta, has announced that he'll campaign to keep Alberta in Canada. I think that this is no longer just an internal dialogue. This is going to start to get messy as we move forward.
Your thoughts on Premier Smith calling for a referendum on whether the province should hold another referendum on separation? It'll be one of the 10 questions on the October 19th ballot.
A referendum to call a referendum. I've never seen this before. It's an interesting move. It's somewhat problematic in the sense that the referendum was being presented as a way to ease pressure and to manage all of the disparate interests in the province. I think right now that by doing this, she's made some folks angry on one side, and on the other side, she has people shaking their heads wondering if this is ever going to end.
So how does Premier Smith respond to the general public while at the same time addressing members of her cabinet who may be in favor of Alberta independence? I mean, Smith herself has said that she wants Alberta to remain within Canada.
That, again, she speaks some words that suggest that indeed she wants Alberta to remain in Canada, but then in certain ways she doesn't act in that way. She certainly with the data breach, for example, that was a moment where she could have entered into the discussion, called an inquiry to get a sense of precisely what's happening. So I think her public address this week was the most, I guess, aggressive she's been in terms of stating that she wants Canada to remain whole and that Alberta should remain part of Canada. But again, the actions and the words sometimes just do not come together, which sends a mixed message to the people of both Alberta and Canada.
Could the Prime Minister perhaps say that the pipeline is off the table if Premier Smith doesn't quell the Alberta separation sentiment?
He could potentially, but Prime Minister Carney is a well-versed politician at this point. I think he's just going to wait it all out. I think that he knows deep down that we in Alberta would be foolhardy to believe that if we chose separation, that the pipeline would remain on the table. The pipeline is also going to face some important, pressures and questions from internal to Alberta. The Alberta Prosperity Project's petition was struck down because it failed in its duty to consult and accommodate affected First Nations. Supporting separatists, as it appears at times that Danielle Smith does, will send a clear message to the First Nations partners that we need to work with to ensure the pipeline gets through. This is going to become a delicate issue. I think that Mark Carney is simply going to stay on the sidelines and watch it all unfold.
The Liberal government is shutting down the naval station on the northern Baffin Island as part of a cost-cutting move, with plans to eventually transfer the property to another owner. The Department of National Defense says it has already begun winding down operations at the facility, which has faced ongoing construction and maintenance issues. Originally built under the government of former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, the Arctic site was intended to serve as a deep-water port and a symbol of Canada's Arctic sovereignty. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government says the base is no longer practical due to its short seasonal operating window and the high cost of ongoing repairs to its infrastructure. The federal and Nunavut governments are partnering on a $2 million initiative aimed at training more for careers in the fishing and marine industry. The federal government is contributing $1.5 million over 3 years, while Nunavut will provide an additional $500,000 over 1 year. Officials say more than 24 students at the Nunavut Fisheries and Marine Training Consortium are expected to benefit, with up to 12 students trained each year.
We know that the tariffs have had a toll on the people working in the auto, in the steel, in the aluminum, and the copper and the forestry sectors. And we're helping them, but also as we're dealing with the trade war, we wanted to make sure that every regions of the country could have support. And that's exactly why I'm here, because it is important for the North to be able also to have its piece of the investments we're making to tackle the impacts of the tariffs. And so that's why I'm pleased today to announce $1.5 million to access training and employment support in the marine sector. So why am I announcing this? Is the goal is to help people in Nunavut to be able to have access to new skills. And so the support will be delivered by the Nunavut Fisheries and Marine Training Consortium, and Daniel, you'll be able to speak about it. But also the goal is for people to be able to complete their Bridge Watch training course, and that will create employment opportunities for those who are going through that training to not only be able to work in the marine sector, but also to be able to work on vessels in international waters.
While the federal government is investing in resource-related training and development in the North, another national debate is unfolding in British Columbia. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was in North Vancouver, where he raised concerns about property rights and the impact of Indigenous land legislation in British Columbia. Poilievre says many Canadians are worried about DRIPA legislation, arguing it could give First Nations land title precedence over homeowners and small businesses. He blamed Ottawa more than the province for this uncertainty, saying that Prime Minister Mark Carney has failed to address those concerns.
The ruling covers 800 acres of Richmond worth $1 billion, but has impact right across British Columbia because almost all of the province is under some sort of claim. And if this precedent holds up, then all of British Columbians may face the loss of their title. Hardworking British Columbians saved up, made a down payment, paid mortgages and property taxes, and now they live in fear that they could lose their homes. Many of our treasured retirees who just want peace of mind so that they can enjoy the retirement they earned now fear they could lose their most valuable material asset, their home. And where is the federal Prime Minister in this federal lawsuit? Again, the Cowichan case was not directed at the government of British Columbia, but at the government of Canada. And he leads that government. He also leads the government that negotiated agreements with First Nations that did not protect property rights.
The back and forth between the provinces of Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador over Churchill River power is continuing. Our contributor, David Clement, has more.
Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Tony Wakeham says that he wants to renegotiate the energy agreement his province signed with Quebec just 17 months ago. The Progressive Conservative leader, elected last October, is rejecting the current Memorandum of Understanding and demanding a better deal for his province. And he might be getting help from Ottawa. Speaking in St. John's, Wakeham said that the existing MOU signed in December 2024 by his Liberal predecessor Andrew Furey and Quebec Premier François Legault is not in the public's interest. And an independent review committee reached the same conclusion. But rather than scrap it entirely, Wakeham wants to build on what works and fix what doesn't, saying, quote, "We have a window of opportunity to get a better agreement. We're going to build on the parts that work, and we're going to fix the parts that don't." Now, the original deal was meant to end decades of friction over hydropower from Labrador's Churchill River. Under the MOU, Newfoundland would receive significantly more revenue from the existing Churchill Falls generating station. In exchange, Hydro-Quebec would partner on 3 new projects along the river, including the long-discussed Gull Island facility, which is downstream from Churchill Falls. Quebec would buy 90% of the new power and pay a proportional share of construction costs. In total, Quebec would gain access to 7,200 megawatts of power at an average price of just 6 cents per kilowatt hour, roughly half the cost of comparable renewable options. Wakeham says that is not enough for Newfoundland. His government wants a larger share of the new electricity for industrial development through the Labrador Trough, which is a massive mineral belt rich in iron ore and other critical minerals already home to operations by giants like Rio Tinto. Now, federally, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government has flagged that area as a priority under its critical minerals strategy. The Premier also wants better pricing terms, especially for Gull Island, so that Newfoundland isn't left carrying billions in debt. And he's pushing for more transmission capacity through Quebec so the province can sell its share of power on the open market at higher prices. Wakeham says he plans to appoint a new negotiating team led by the former chief executive of Fortis and has promised to hold a referendum on any final agreement. Quebec Premier Christine Frechette says she's open to talks. She spoke with Wakeham and she expects to be meeting with him soon. Both leaders, she said, agree on the importance of reaching a win-win deal in the short term. But still, challenges remain. Energy expert Pierre-Olivier Pinault at HEC Montreal called the new developments a large gamble, noting that Quebec is shouldering most of the investment while Newfoundland has a history of cost overruns on projects like Muskrat Falls. A Quebec provincial election is also scheduled for October, which could change the political landscape. With federal interest in grid connections and critical minerals, Ottawa may play a role in helping bridge any gaps. The coming weeks of negotiations will determine whether this latest attempt to unlock Churchill River's potential finally succeeds or becomes just another chapter in a long and complicated story.
Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says the province's first supervised drug consumption site is expected to open next month in Winnipeg. The site will be located in a largely industrial area of the city and is part of the province's broader strategy to address addiction and open drug use. Kinew says the initiative is one component of a wider plan aimed at responding to concerns raised by local businesses and school officials about public drug use in some Winnipeg neighborhoods.
Now, downtown Winnipeg is Manitoba's downtown. And this is a place where people love to get coffee, to check out sports, to see museums, to go to restaurants, and to do so many other fun things. And in order for us to continue making downtown safer, we need to get more and more people downtown. So as part of supporting that goal, we're really happy to see all the wonderful people who are that friendly face in the community, who help our relatives and community members who need more support, but are also there for everyone else too, to be a sign of reassurance and safety, and also just a friendly place to maybe ask some questions. Recovery, law enforcement. We had the biggest drug bust in history yesterday. We're doing the harm reduction, the supervised consumption site, opening next month. And then we've got prevention as well too, which probably looks like getting a handle on the child welfare system, which has been a generational trap to trauma and homelessness. And we as a society owe it to ourselves and owe it to the kids to do better on.
So as you know, we took on the exemption process. So we're going through that right now. Aboriginal Health and Wellness will be running the site. They are in hiring phase right now. So as soon as they're got their staff hired up and trained, then the site will be open. Again, it's a medical-led model. It's about moving people to the supports and services that they need, that they so desperately need. I've heard people talk about open, drug consumption in the streets, and this is why we need this open.
RCMP in Manitoba are testing out a new alert system in a number of communities. The pilot initiative will see detachments send out notifications to community members by text, email, or automated phone calls. The system will share public safety advisories, information on missing people, traffic or road conditions alerts, and requests for public assistance. The pilot program is expected to run for the next 3 months. Liberal MP Stephen Guilbeault may be the most vocal critic, but he's not alone in his party in raising concerns about Prime Minister Mark Carney's recent environmental policy direction. Prime Minister Carney recently signed an agreement with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith that could pave the way for construction on a West Coast oil pipeline as early as September 2027. The deal also includes changes to Alberta's industrial carbon pricing system, slowing down the pace of previously planned increases. Ahead of the agreement, 14 Liberal MPs sent a letter to the Prime Minister at the end of April, outlining recommendations and expressing unease with the direction of federal climate policy. British Columbia's Public Safety Minister Nina Krieger says that the RCMP investigation in the Tumbler Ridge mass shooting is in its final stages, but cautions that releasing details too soon could undermine the case. Krieger says she understands the public's demand for answers, but insists the integrity of the investigation must be protected. Her comments come after 2 gun control advocacy groups renewed calls for more information about the firearms used in the February 10th shooting that left 9 people dead, including the 18-year-old shooter. Police Souvent and Danforth Families for Safe Communities argue the RCMP should disclose the types of weapons involved, saying the information is needed for informed debate on Canada's gun laws. British Columbia's largest source of electricity, the Site C hydroelectric project, has officially been renamed the John Horgan Dam and Generating Station. The renaming honors former BC Premier John Horgan, who played a key role in the project during his time in government. The Site C Dam was one of the province's most politically debated infrastructure projects, with approvals and development stretching over more than a decade. Construction officially began in December of 2014 under the former BC Liberal government. But it was John Horgan, as BC's 36th premier, who gave the green light to complete construction.
The Site C Dam was completed last year. It is BC's largest clean energy infrastructure project. It powers about 500,000 homes. It has a projected lifespan of more than 100 years. There were thousands of people that helped to build this project. But at one point in this project's history, the entire trajectory and whether or not it would actually be built rested on the shoulders of a single person, and that person was John Horgan. And his approach of welcoming disagreement and welcoming debate was maybe one of the biggest lessons I learned from John over my years working with him. And it was key to the decision that he ultimately reached, which was that finishing that project, continuing the project at Site C, was in British Columbia's best interest. The decision ensures generations of clean electricity for British Columbians, and crucially, it will be the foundation that we build on for generations to come. I am honored to be the Premier standing here on this day with the Energy Minister, with my caucus colleagues, with the Horgan family, to announce that the Site C Dam will be renamed the John Horgan Dam and Generating Station.
Now it's time for our weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy. All yours, Dan.
Teresa, it is the official launch of the summer driving season, especially in the United States, which consumes about 9 times more fuel than we do, 21 million barrels a day. And it really means that prices should be going up. Now, I have been doing this well over 25, 30 years, and I've got the chops to prove it. But I've never seen a circumstance where before the long weekend you see a price drop. So there is a suggestion that I've made here many times in the past few weeks that the so-called futures market, the commodities market that determines what the future price of oil will be, is completely disconnected with reality. Not only do we have higher demand kicking off now for the whole entire part of summer, we also have a report this week. As you know, weekly, there's the Department of Energy's weekly petroleum inventory report that showed a historical drop in supplies of oil in the United States of some 17.8 million barrels. That has never happened in the time going back 44 years since they've been doing this, back to 1982. So, for markets to now somehow suggest that, what's happening is a nothing burger over there. It doesn't matter if we're losing 10, 20 million barrels in locked in supply, that we're draining, depleting reserves around the world. The reality is that higher demand, less supply means higher prices, not lower prices. So, those engaged in shorting oil and shorting commodities are really creating a scenario for a very dangerous outcome in which we have lower prices pushing demand much higher at a time in which supply is certainly not there. And I don't care who talks about what China might have hidden in terms of its strategic reserves, or what Japan might have, or Venezuela suddenly popping out and providing 12 million barrels to India. It doesn't matter what the argument is or what the excuse is. The reality is that you have an energy shock, and the energy shock can only be remedied by getting more oil to the market, which is not going to happen right now when 20% is offline as a result of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz and damage that's been done to nations in and around the Persian Gulf. The reality is that prices have to go higher to be able to, as it were, create some form of demand destruction so that supply can actually catch up. The longer we delay this, and that some people play the game, and I'm not pointing fingers, but I know the Trump administration has a lot to do with shorting oil. They want to, because they know gasoline in many parts of their, among their crowd, is an extremely sensitive issue. I know, because in 2016 to 2020, 2018, I worked in the States with gas price predictions, did tons of interviews, a lot of U.S. media talked about, gas prices, where they were going then. And almost every day, as prices went up for whatever reason, Trump would make a tweet and that would push prices down. I know he's extraordinarily sensitive to this, but you've created a shortage globally, and you have to, own up to it and recognize that the world is now short 1.6 billion barrels. What does that mean? The world uses just a little over 100 million a day, 100 million barrels a day. That means 16 days of no use of any type of hydrocarbon has to be in order to get the markets balanced again. That's not going to happen. That's going to take months, if not years. Now, Teresa, I'm being really blunt about this because it's important people understand that what we saw this week in terms of a 9-cent decrease across Canada today, Friday, and what we're going to see tomorrow, a 3-cent decrease tomorrow, is a head fake. And while we celebrate the fact there's some relief, it's relief that comes with a massive cost, which we're going to have to pay for. They're kicking the can down the road. It's short-term gain for long-term pain. Consider it however you want. The reality is that this is a dysfunctional market. It is apparently on the border of manipulation. I don't mean manipulating prices higher, manipulating them deliberately lower so as to mask the real impact of a shortage. And we have what is now a global oil price shock on a scale we have never seen, not 1973, not 1991, not 2008, not 2012. There have been various other points in between those years. But this means that the country and the world is going to face a day of reckoning. And the reckoning will come at higher prices, and potentially not so much in Canada, although it's not impossible, that we will see shortages, that we will see rationing. And I really want to caution people that it's nice to talk about gas prices going up and down, but that is based on the assumption of the credibility of a futures market that seems to be way out of whacked out of proportion. And when you have a situation in which supply drops, demand skyrockets, and you still drop prices, you know someone is playing a really very dangerous manipulative game in the markets. The commodities markets are not to be trusted. I say that because these numbers in my 30 years of doing this, and I've got, the records to prove it. I mean, a lot of people say, well, where do you get this? It's on computer. I mean, that's just one of 10 of these things, prices that came between those times. So I know exactly where the problem is. And it seems to me that we are going to have to spend a bit more time as to how dysfunctional the markets are. This is not about algorithms. This is not about AI. This is about people taking very strong positions to deliberately drop the price of energy and create an even greater problem as we get closer to the point where supplies of emergency supplies in the world, future building out of infrastructure will not be enough to meet global demand. We are heading for a shortage, which won't mean just higher fuel prices and unavailability. It's going to affect the price of food, fertilizer, urea, plastics, chemicals, all of these things that make a modern society function. We only have to look at the data in the United States on the drop in diesel demand to know that there is a far bigger problem, why it's being hidden, how it's being hidden, and the fact that not many people are taking notice, and those that are being marginalized will not in any way, shape, or form, prevent from what's going to happen in the next couple of months. Not only are we going to deal with higher prices, they're going to remain there much longer. So, Teresa, this week, first week of Memorial Day, long weekend, the U.S. Motorists getting back. Look for prices to move up about 10 cents a liter, back to about the $1.95 range from the $1.85 on average across the country. Doesn't matter where you are, prices are heading up. It doesn't matter what Donald Trump has to say. At the end of the day, there's still no resolution, and we have a massive shortfall in oil, petroleum products like diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel. And that's going to be the story of the summer.
An Ebola treatment center in eastern Congo has been set on fire as fear and anger grow in a region at the center of a rapidly spreading outbreak. The attack comes as aid agencies struggle to contain a rare strain of the virus that circulated for weeks before being detected in an area already facing insecurity, limited health infrastructure, and widespread displacement. Authorities report 148 suspected deaths and nearly 600 suspected cases, though the World Health Organization says that the true scale of the outbreak may be significantly higher. And as the situation worsens, Canadian aid workers are on the ground helping respond to the outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Uganda. Trish Newport, an emergency manager with Doctors Without Borders, says teams are dealing with a fast-moving and geographically spread crisis, with case numbers expected to rise.
We had suspect cases arriving in the surgical project saying, we're sick, we need help. It's a surgical project. We don't have isolations. So the team referred them to the hospital in Bunia. The hospital said, our isolation is full. We have no space, and sent them back to us. So our team was like, this is a surgical project. They called all around to health centers around. All of them had isolations that were full. There was no space. So our team built an isolation, and people just kept coming. They were like, people know they have Ebola, and they're like, okay, MSF knows Ebola. They will help us. We have people coming to our office. That is an old hospital that we used to have. Now it's our office space. We have people showing up at the gate saying, we're sure people in our family are dying. We're sure we have Ebola. Like, help us. And so this is the situation today. Every province has an emergency preparedness, but no preparedness was ready for this, right? I mean, when you have 500 suspect cases and so many deaths, you never had enough body bags to do safe and dignified burials. You don't have actually enough PPE to be able to safely respond to all of the situation. It's extremely hectic.
Montreal Public Health is warning of a rise in Lyme disease cases after officials recorded 161 infections in the city so far in 2025. The figure is the highest since 2003, when Lyme disease became a notifiable illness in Quebec. Across the province, 869 cases have been reported between January 1st and November 5th of 2025, as tick-borne infections continue to increase. Provincial officials say the rise may be linked to climate change, with warmer temperatures allowing ticks to survive and spread more easily. President Donald Trump has postponed a planned Thursday signing ceremony for a new executive order on artificial intelligence, saying he wants to ensure the policy does not undermine America's competitive advantage in the fast-moving sector.
Mr. President, why has today's executive order on AI been postponed?
Because I didn't like certain aspects of it. I postponed it. I think it gets in the way of, we're leading China, we're leading everybody, and I don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of that lead. We have a very substantial on AI. It's causing tremendous good, and it's also bringing in a lot of jobs, tremendous numbers of jobs. Again, we have more people working right now than we've ever had. I really thought that could have been a blocker, and I want to make sure that it's not.
Mr. President, with President Xi last week, did you discuss AI safeguards?
Who? What?
In China last week with President Xi,
yes.
Did you discuss AI?
I did. No, I discussed it. And he acknowledges how well we're doing. We're doing well. He's doing. It's the two of us. The two countries are fighting for it. Other countries are way behind. Way behind. They're fighting for it. They want it. Everybody wants it, but they're way behind. But I didn't want to do it. I postponed that meeting. It was a press conference. It was a signing, actually, because I didn't like what I was.
The decision comes as the U.S. government continues to weigh in on how to regulate and support the rapid development of AI technology amid growing global competition in the field. Trump said he had concerns the timing or details of the order could unintentionally slow innovation or weaken the country's position against international rivals. The final episode of CBS's The Late Show with Stephen Colbert aired Thursday night, running an extended 1 hour and 17 minutes and featuring a lineup of celebrity cameos, including a farewell appearance from Paul McCartney. Stephen Colbert opened the broadcast emotionally, addressing both the live audience at Ed Sullivan Theater and viewers at home. He described The Late Show as a joy machine.
Folks, we have done over 1,800 of these shows. And most nights, I come out here and I talk to the audience beforehand. And tonight, I thought I'd talk to the audience in here and the audience out there at home. This show, I want you to know and you to know, has been a joy for us to do for you. In fact, we call this show the Joy Machine, all right? Lewis stole it from us, and we are currently in litigation right now. You better lawyer up, buddy. We call it the Joy Machine because to do this many shows, it has to be a machine.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you choose to do it with joy, it doesn't hurt as much when your fingers get caught in the gears. And I cannot adequately explain to you what the people who work here have done for each other and how much we mean to each other.
Yeah.
So I will just say, I would just say to them, you are all the great Achilles whom we knew. Now, on night one of the Colbert Report, back in the day, I said, anyone can read the news to you. I promise to feel the news at you. And I realized pretty soon in this job that our job over here was different. We were here to feel the news with you. And I don't know about you, but I sure have felt it.
CBS created The Late Show in 1993 as a new home for David Letterman after he lost out on The Tonight Show at NBC. Over time, first under Letterman and then later Colbert, it grew into a late-night institution and one of the most consistent competitors to The Tonight Show. And turning to sports, top seed Victoria Mboko earned a straight-set win over fellow Canadian Leylah Fernandez 6-4, 6-4 in quarterfinal action at the Strasbourg International.
And that backhand gives Victoria Mboko a berth in the semifinals here in Strasbourg. Her third semifinal of the season and a win over her countrywoman in this all-Canadian quarterfinal. The world number 9, the number 1 seed, gets through in just over an hour and a half. Vicky Mboko.
The 19-year-old from Burlington, Ontario, leaned on a strong return game to control the match against the 7th-seeded Fernandez. Mboko converted multiple break opportunities and improved to 2-0 against Fernandez in their head-to-head meetings. She now advances to the semifinals, where she will face Romania's Jacqueline Christian at the WTA 500 clay court event. Hamilton's incoming American Hockey League franchise has officially unveiled its name and branding, leaning heavily into the city's steelworking identity. The team announced Thursday by Oak View Group, TD Coliseum, and the NHL's New York Islanders will be called the Hamilton Hammers, a nod to the city's nickname, the Hammer. The logo features crossed hammers to reflect Hamilton's industrial roots, along with an orange and blue color scheme connected to the NHL affiliate, the Islanders. The Islanders are relocating their AHL affiliate from Bridgeport, Connecticut to the newly renovated 18,000-seat TD Coliseum ahead of next season. The Montreal Canadiens came out flying in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Final, jumping all over the slow-starting Carolina Hurricanes team and never looking back in a 6-2 win Thursday night. Montreal scored 4 times in the opening period alone, with Cole Caulfield and Philip Deneau striking early to set the tone. Juraj Slafkovsky added 2 goals in the third, including an empty netter, a stunning start against the East's top seed, which had allowed more than 2 goals just once all postseason.
Puck numerous times to try to keep Dobish in his net. Here is a chance for Slafkovsky in and scores! A highlight reel goal, Juraj Slafkovsky.
Habs head coach Martin St. Louis spoke to the media after the game.
Marty, what do you think it says about your team that with such little time to prepare, you guys had time to prepare, coaching staff, scouting, whatever you were doing, but your players to have such little time and get into those meetings and be able to execute what you're telling them to do, what does it say about your team?
Yeah, I mean, we knew for a long time if we got through Buffalo, we were playing Carolina. So we were able to have, we had, you know, obviously our analytic people, but, you know, Alex Burrows does a lot of that grunt work for us, and he worked hard while we were trying to close a series against Buffalo. And you got to be careful in giving so much information to players in a short amount of time. You got to pick a couple things and try to you know, address that, and that's what we did. I think we played through identity tonight. You know, that we were nice balance. We let the puck do the work. We were very opportunistic on our chances.
Game 2 goes Saturday night in Carolina. The federal government is bringing back next month the Canada Strong Pass, which offers discounts on Via Rail travel and admission to museums and national parks. A news release from Canadian Heritage says the pass will be available from June 19th to September 7th. It offers free entry to all Parks Canada sites and a 25% rebate on camping fees. The pass also offers free Via Rail trips for people under 18 traveling with their parents and 25% off fares for travelers between 18 and 24 years old. I'm Teresa Skubik. Good night, Canada.